You've been in a relationship. Things felt off. You couldn't explain why. You weren't being hit. You weren't being insulted directly. But somehow, you always ended up apologizing. You always ended up feeling guilty. And she always ended up getting exactly what she wanted. That's not love. That's a system. And today I'm going to break it down for you, piece by piece. Stay until the end, because the last test will tell you more about yourself than 3 years of therapy. The first manipulation is the oldest one in the book, and it still works on 90% of men. She goes quiet, not a fight, not an argument, just silence. Cold, calculated, deliberate silence. She answers in one word. She doesn't look at you the same way. The warmth is gone, and you have no idea why. Here's what's happening inside your head. You start scanning. What did I do? Was it yesterday? Was it this morning? You replayed the last 48 hours like a detective trying to solve a crime you didn't commit. And that's exactly the point. The silence isn't emotional. It's a tool. She's creating anxiety in you on purpose, because anxious men seek resolution. Anxious men apologize. Anxious men give in. The silence ends the moment you capitulate. And she never had to say a single word. You can handle conflict. Someone yells at you. You respond. Someone makes an accusation. You defend yourself. The rules are clear. But silence has no rules. Psychologists call this ambient hostility. There's no specific charge. There's no moment you can point to and say, this is the problem. You're just living in a fog of disapproval, and the brain finds that unbearable. This is especially true for men who grew up with emotionally unpredictable parents. If as a child you learned that love disappears without warning, then an adult woman withdrawing her warmth doesn't just feel uncomfortable. It feels like a survival threat. The question is, what do you do when it happens? Simple. You don't chase the silence. You live your life. You go to the gym. You call a friend. You signal, calmly, without drama, that your emotional state is not dependent on her approval. That's not cruelty. That's self-respect. 4 signs you're being manipulated, not loved. 1. You apologize more than she does. If the ratio is 80-20 and you're the 80, something is wrong. 2. You feel confused after arguments. You walked in with a legitimate concern and walked out wondering if you're the problem. 3. Her moods dictate the atmosphere of your home. If the energy of the space changes based on whether she's happy, you're not in a relationship. You're in a hostage situation. 4. You've started hiding things from her, not because you're guilty, but because you're afraid of her reaction. That fear is the cage. Let me be clear. Real tears are real. Real pain is real. This is not about dismissing a woman's emotions. This is about the tactical use of tears to shut down a conversation. You raise a concern. I noticed you've been spending a lot of time talking to your ex. A legitimate thing to bring up. And she cries. Now the conversation is no longer about her ex. It's about how you made her cry. You're apologizing. You're comforting her. And the original issue, buried. If every time you raise a concern she cries, you will stop raising concerns. That's the outcome. That's the goal. How do you respond? Calmly. I can see you're upset. I'm going to give you some space. When you're ready to talk about what I actually asked, I'm here. And then you leave the room. This one doesn't get talked about enough. Threatening to leave. Not because she wants to leave, but as a pressure tactic. As a way to reset your behavior. Maybe we should just break up. I don't know if this is working. Sometimes I think we want different things. said during a conflict, said when you held a boundary. Here's what that does to a man: it activates abandonment fear. Every future disagreement now has a hidden cost. If I push back too hard, I might lose her. So you stop pushing back. You become smaller, quieter, more compliant. Call it. If you genuinely want to leave, I'll support that decision. But if you're saying this to end the argument, I need you to know that it doesn't work on me. Say it once, mean it, and watch what happens. You remember the argument one way. She remembers it completely differently. In her version, you were the aggressor. You said things you didn't say. The context is gone. And she says it with such conviction that you start to doubt yourself. This is gaslighting in its most intimate form. It attacks something fundamental: your trust in your own perception. The defense requires discipline. Write things down. After a significant conversation, write a brief note. What was said? What happened? How it ended? You're not building a legal case. You're building an anchor to reality. Every man has heard this. I'm complicated. I'm emotional. I'm just like this. Here's the translation. Don't hold me accountable. A person who genuinely wants a good relationship says, I know I reacted badly. I'm working on it. That's ownership. That's growth. I'm just complicated as a closing statement. It's the end of the conversation before it begins. Fine means not fine. Proceed with extreme caution. Do whatever you want. She's watching. This is a test. I'm not mad. She's mad. She wants you to figure out why. We need to talk. You're already guilty of something. You just don't know what yet. Nothing's wrong. Something is wrong. It happened 3 days ago, and you still haven't noticed. Most manipulation is reactive, but there's a rarer type. The woman who does it from a position of complete calm. No drama, no tears, no outbursts. She simply manages you, quietly, consistently, over years. She knows what makes you insecure. She uses it precisely, and rarely, so you don't see the pattern. One day, you realize you haven't made a major decision without her input in 2 years. These relationships are the hardest to leave because there was no violence, no obvious abuse. There were just 1,000 tiny moments where you handed over a piece of yourself, and it felt voluntary. Here's how the emotional spiral works mechanically. She creates tension. You feel discomfort. You seek resolution. She provides it, but only after you've adjusted your behavior. You feel relief. Your brain tags that as, she makes me feel better. Her presence becomes the solution to a problem she's creating. That's not love. That's a loop. Men fall in love with how a woman makes them feel about themselves. Women fall in love with how a man makes them feel safe. A manipulative woman exploits the first part. She makes you feel chosen, irreplaceable, and then slowly withdraws that feeling to control your behavior. The high she gave you at the start is the hook. The withdrawal is the leash. I knew a man, smart, successful, 4 years in a relationship, but there was always someone else in the background, an ex, a close friend, mentioned just often enough to keep him slightly off balance. He never asked directly, because every time he got close, something happened. She got upset, or suddenly very loving. The conversation never happened. The third person was never a real threat. The third person was a tool, a presence that kept him in a permanent low-grade state of insecurity. He left eventually, not because of the other person, but because he looked in the mirror and didn't recognize himself. The relationship wasn't a love story. It was a management system, and he was the asset being managed. Women don't fall in love with men who need them. They fall in love with men they might lose. When you are fully secure in yourself, when your happiness doesn't depend on her mood, when your self worth doesn't require her validation, you become genuinely attractive, not because you're withholding, but because you're complete. A manipulative dynamic can only survive in a vacuum of self respect. Fill that vacuum, and the manipulation has nowhere to attach. Last question. Answer it honestly. When was the last time you said no to her and didn't feel guilty about it? If you can't remember, this video was for you. The goal isn't to be cold. It's not to be dominant in some performance. The goal is to be a man whose yes means something because his no also means something.